Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, your resource for helping you break free of the stressful dogmatic diet and exercise rat race, helping you get in the best shape of your life on your own terms. Matt Schifferly here, founder of the Red Delta Project and authors of the books Fitness Independence and Smart Body Weight Training. Today's topic, we're talking about arm training tips, specifically how to get your arms stronger, some of the things that I've picked up over the past year or so that have made a big difference in not just the effectiveness of my training, but also the safety and enjoyment of it as well. Because one of the things that commonly occurs, especially with bodyweight training, is a little bit of elbow pain and tendinosis that comes about from doing very heavy work. And when you have a joint issue, particularly shoulder, elbow, or even wrist, it's really hard to get very strong and built up arm muscles when you're battling joint pain. So these tips are just as much about keeping joint pain at bay as they are about helping you maximize your upper body and arm training workouts. So let's see, what do we got here? First and foremost, focus on tension control. This is the topic, of course, of the latest book, Smart Body Weight Training, that I came out with. But it's worth repeating because it's so easy to forget that the tension you put in the muscles through your focus and concentration is the thing that is responsible for changing your muscles. The workouts you do, the routines, the equipment you use, the exercises you do, that's all good, and it's very important influences towards tension control. But at the end of the day, if your brain struggles to put tension in your muscles, all of that other stuff doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot. And you can change your routine a million different ways. You can have every curl or tricep extension exercise under the sun, but if your brain has trouble talking to the actual muscle and making tension go to the muscle, not really much is ever going to happen. But once your mind has a good control over getting tension in the muscle, and you can control the tension throughout a big range of motion, so you have tension, like tricep tension at the bottom and top of your exercise, then suddenly everything works a hell of a lot better. So be aware of the tension you are able to put in the muscle, particularly at the top and bottom of an exercise, or when the muscle is extended and flexed. This is usually the case where people have challenge where they can get their tension in their muscle in a flexed position, but not necessarily elongated position. And that's very common. Case in point, like having a straight arm. Like, can you flex your bicep with your arms straight? Not just with an arm bent, like you're, quote, making a muscle like when you did when you were a kid. Same thing with your triceps. You can extend your arm all the way and really flex that horseshoe of a tricep, but can you keep your triceps tense and flexed when your hands are close to your shoulder, like at the bottom of a push-up or at the bottom of a dip? Working on that type of tension control to have good tension in your muscle, both at an extended and flexed position, goes a long way in helping you get more from your workouts and keeping stress out of your joints, because ultimately stress often goes into our joints when it's not able to be held in a muscle because there's not enough tension in the muscle itself. So first and foremost, tension control, and it's not a very complicated thing, just simply practicing kind of twitching, flexing the muscles a little bit before your workout, sometimes kind of tapping the muscles with a thumb knuckle, or sometimes people will kind of slap the muscles with the palm or their finger bellies. That's a good way to kind of wake up those nerves. Neurological connection gets going. You see sometimes that on YouTube videos where bodybuilders, before they do something, their friend will be like slapping their back or slapping it. It sounds like it's this big macho, screaming, yelling kind of thing, but it's actually serving the purpose of getting a better tension control and mind-muscle connection with those muscles, getting better at putting tension in the muscles in the first place. So that is the first thing to pay attention to, and that should really be the focal point of all of your training for all of your muscles, but especially with your arm muscles. The second point is focusing on the compound movements. Compound movements like push-ups, dips, handstand work, pull-ups, rows, those types of movements that involve your arms with all of your other muscle groups in your torso and your upper body. And this is particularly important, and I mentioned this in my chapter on chain training in the book, where if you want to get a lot of tension in a muscle, it's a lot easier to get the tension to be in that muscle if it's also in the surrounding muscles. So if you want your biceps, for example, to be full of tension, also bring tension to the shoulders, to the forearms, to the back, to the chest, and so on. And the reason for this is tension flows along your muscles. It doesn't necessarily just sit in a muscle, it flows just like any other form of energy, where it goes kind of almost in like a wave pattern. And when you're trying to isolate and bring tension into one area, there's going to naturally be a bit of a handicap, or a bit of a break neurologically on how much tension you can bring to a particular muscle when you're basically concentrating on put tension in one muscle, but remove it from the other muscles. Think of like using a chain, the chain training theory. You can take a length of chain and attach one end of it to something like a car or something, and you grab on the other end. You can pull on that chain, and you can put a lot of force and stress on the entire chain by trying to pull on the whole thing. But if you grab like one or two links and try and pull those apart between like your fingers, you're just not going to put a lot of force to it. And it's kind of a similar thing when it comes to your muscle groups. You're going to have potentially a lot more total tension in a muscle when you include that muscle with everything else that you're trying to work. I know it may not feel a little bit more focused when you're doing like isolation type of movements like tricep extensions and bicep curls. But even if it feels like it's more, it's not often total amount of tension that's higher. Usually it feels more concentrated, not because there's more tension in the biceps or triceps, but because there's less tension in the other muscles. So by relationship, it feels like it's more, but it can actually oftentimes be a lot less. So focus your arm training techniques on the big movements that are also involving your shoulders, your chest, your back, and so on. With that said, keep your mind focused again on using your arms in those moves. Oftentimes people will say, oh, well, I do push-ups, but it's all in the chest. Or I do pull-ups and it's all in the back. It's like, remember, tension is going there because your brain is putting it there. It's not the exercise. It's not even necessarily the technique. Tension goes where your mind concentrates it. So when you're doing those exercises, yes, pull-ups are about your back. And yes, push-ups are about your chest. But also put tension in your arms. Use those as your primary arm exercise by concentrating tension into those muscles. And it's going to be a heck of a lot more effective for developing your arm muscles. Another point, number 3 here, is use both shoulder and elbow motion when you're using your arm muscles. And this goes for even the isolation exercises, quote unquote. When you're doing curls, for example, or you're doing tricep extensions, the old bodybuilding adage is that you want to lock your arm in place. So the only joint you have any movement in is your elbow in an attempt to, quote, isolate it as much as possible. But as I was saying with chain training, I think isolation is actually more counterproductive than productive. It's fine to focus tension in an arm muscle. Like doing a bicep curl, for example, can put a lot of focus on the biceps. But we don't want to isolate as much as possible because the less tension and assistance we bring from the muscles that surround your biceps, the less your brain's going to be able to put a lot of tension in the biceps in the first place. So what I recommend is when you're doing any sort of focused work, allow some movement in the shoulders as well. Don't try and lock your shoulder in place. Back in the day when I used to do a lot more like bodybuilding style weightlifting movements like cable push downs, bicep curls on dumbbells and stuff, I often was very frustrated with that because I felt like I put more energy into trying to prevent my arm from moving at the shoulder joint than I did actually lifting the weight and trying to keep it as strict as possible. So I say, allow things to move at your shoulders a little bit. So if you're doing a bicep curl of any sort, allow your shoulder to slightly flex a little bit so your elbow moves forward just a bit, so you are using that shoulder joint. If you're doing tricep press downs or tricep extensions, for example, when your hand gets closer to your shoulder, allow your elbow to lift up a little so that when you start to extend your arm, you're pulling down ever so slightly with the shoulder. Granted, most of your movement's going to be at your elbows. It's not going to be a lot in your shoulders. It's going to be like 90% elbow, 10% shoulder movement. But allowing the shoulder movement to happen a little bit is going to create a lot more of a holistic form of tension to flow throughout your entire arm and shoulder, give you less stress in the actual elbow joints, and give you much more potential total tension in your biceps and triceps. So don't try and lock the upper arm in place quite as much as you think you need to. Allow a little bit of movement, and I think that'll be a way to go for you. Number 4 is use your focused work as supplemental rather than focused on it. So one of the mistakes I used to do is if I wanted to build up my biceps, I would do like 1 or 2 sets of a compound movement like pull-ups, and then I would do set after set after set of all these different curl-based exercises, compound curls and machine curls and cable curls and curls on the barbell and like bench curls, tons of different curling exercises, when in reality I should have reversed it. I should have done the opposite, where most of my work would have been pull-ups of various grips and types, rows, lever work, things that involve my entire pulling chain, and then I would finish off the workout with a series of curls, something where I would be doing maybe 2 sets, maybe 3 sets of curls. Nothing terribly aggressive as far as repetitions, probably just the standard 8 to 12 would be fine, and that would be like dessert, if you will. It's not the meat and potatoes. Curls and tricep extensions, they're kind of like having a fresh piece of fruit at the end of a meal. You wouldn't necessarily want it to be the main course, but it's a nice way to finish off and just make sure you get everything taken care of at the end of the workout. So use your focus work. I'm not saying don't do it, but don't make it the main course. Use it as just the finisher. And then the final tip for improving your arm control or your arm workouts and getting stronger arms is make sure you're focusing on keeping a lot of stability in your back. Because, as I said, your arms are moving and you've got a little bit of movement in your shoulder, but you can only be as strong as you are stable. And a lot of your arm stability comes from keeping your back tense. So don't let your back relax. Let your back, basically think of like if you were doing a lever or a deadlift, keeping your lats engaged, your shoulders down and back as much as you can away from your ears. Feel like you're hugging your spine with your lats. When you do that, you create so much more stability in your spine, in your scapula, and in your glenohumeral joint where your arm attaches to your side. And when you have much more stability in your arm, you will basically open up those neurological floodgates and your brain can put a heck of a lot more tension into your biceps and triceps because it's always doing that based on how stable and secure it feels. If your back is loosey-goosey and your shoulders are moving and your shoulders are rounded and up near your ears, your brain knows that is a fairly uncertain situation. And it's going to say, well, I know you want to put a lot of stress into your muscles, but I'm not going to let you because it's like walking on a sheet of ice. I'm not going to let you just break into a full sprint on ice because you don't have the stability and the control necessary to keep yourself safe. So lock down your back as tight as you can when you're doing your curls, when you're doing your tricep extensions, and you're going to find it a lot easier and a lot more effective for your focused work and for a lot of your compound movements as well, push-ups, dips, pull-ups, and so on. So there you go. Those are my top 5 training tips for building stronger arms After all, it is the summer, and we're all in t-shirts and tank top weather, so now's the time to really start getting after it. Let me know if you have any questions, reddeltaproject@gmail.com. Check out my books, Fitness Independence and Smart Bodyweight Training. Smart Bodyweight Training, again, has more on tension control and the chain training theory that I was talking about earlier. Both are on Amazon in paperback and Kindle format. And as always, thank you so much for the reviews on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Google Play. Helps me spread the word about the podcast a lot, and it's good karma for helping other people discover it too as well. I will talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit, live free.